Welcome to Exit Frag. I'm Zeph. I'm joined by my co-host Esports Andy. Today we are going to be doing the VCT Americas tier list post-Masters Bangkok.
Well, I think like all the power rankings we're going to be going through during this week are actually a lot closer than people really think. Like, especially the tiers in the middle regions for like a lot of these teams, it's like anyone can kind of beat anyone at this stage 5 years into Valorant, and I think people are going to be shocked with who we're going to put in some of these places.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's some unexpected picks that a lot of people are not going to really agree with us on. But you know what people will agree on right now is that we probably need to put 2Game Esports in the D tier. Unfortunately, their kickoff stage was pretty awful. And we talked about them possibly making like roster changes, and unfortunately, I think that they should try to do something like that. If I see any like Brazilian team going the Leviathan route and just getting a bunch of NA players in the last ditch effort, it probably would be 2Game Esports, just because they need to like defend their spot in VCT Americas.
They should have picked up the Rankers core instead of Envy. Like,
That's true. That's true.
that might have saved them from relegation, but who knows? If Spike comes back and is like insane and saves them at the very end, that'd be nice. But yeah, Two Glue is at the bottom.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's talk about the mess that is 100 Thieves. I'm just gonna put them in the B tier right now. We'll move them either up or down, or depending on what we think. But going into the season, I was kind of meh about 100 Thieves, and then they ended up having like a pretty early exit out of the tournament. There was a lot of drama with Nadeshot, and he was like insinuating that there may be like roster changes, but it ended up not being true because, well, I just don't think Nadeshot's that like in touch with what Valorant like, or what the Valorant free agent market really is. I think he depends a lot on Zix and whoever his assistant coach is, and I don't know. I don't see this roster changing anytime soon. But I do think that they're in kind of like a middle of the pack situation for me.
I think I would agree, I guess, because I would probably have them around like the fifth best team in the region right now. So I guess that would be like barely maybe A, but like the top of B. I think there's a lot of promise with this team if they're playing if they're calming, if they're working together. They did have that like loss to NRG to be eliminated, but NRG had good pieces even if Verno wasn't speaking.
Right.
So I couldn't. They only played like some of like the top teams.
Yeah. They did play some of the best teams in the tournament, and also it is a like the kickoff tournament was like a double elimination. It's not like what we're heading into, which is the regular VCT Americas season, where they're going to just be doing like weekly rotations. I do think that 100 Thieves strive more when they're playing in that environment, because we saw last season when they were playing like regular season, even though they were middle of the pack, because of that, they were able to turn up during the Americas playoffs. They already kind of had like their opponents scouted in a sense.
Yeah, and I think also if because all the players have kind of been starting to play good. Boostio is still like having like rough games. Like we were, if you watch the NRG 100 Thieves game, it was just like who's gonna have like the worst performance, Boostio or FNS. I think that was like the whole thing. But then I think the thing that will be the key difference if 100 Thieves can actually push and make a international this year is if Zander can play at a pretty high level. I think he was kind of like the weaker link in the tournament and for this team, and he's going to be crucial to make sure that they actually can compete with like Sentinels, Loud, KRU, which they're going to all have to play this first split.
Yeah, I agree. I think Zander, I'm not saying he hasn't meshed with the team, but I definitely feel like he's had a slower start than most people expect. expected.
Hmm.
At this point, in my opinion, I always expect slow starts from tier 2 players, just because of
Yeah.
the time to like adjust to like a different system, or playing at the VCT stage level, or whatever it is. But usually we've seen that like tier 2 players take a little bit longer to adjust than like maybe players from tier 1 entering a different system.
Yeah, and he's an insane player. Like if you look back at him in tier two, he was always like the best, like smokes player. Yeah, he's like a
Yeah, he was
smokes.
the best controller in tier 2 for sure.
Yeah, so I just think maybe that this month of off time was like exactly what this team needed to really pick it up and maybe even beat Sentinels in the first week.
Yeah, I agree.
But I still have him like around fifth.
All right, so high B or low
Mm-hmm.
A?
High B.
High B, okay. All right, moving on to Evil Geniuses. Now, I particularly have an affinity for this team. I think the reasons are like beyond obvious at this point. My boy Ye's over there. But unfortunately, much like the rest of Ye's career post Optic, it's not been great. They played 3 games and then got eliminated. Ye was moments of brilliance here and there. Shout out to the 1v3 clutch on Split. That was my favorite moment from him, from kickoff. And I'm hoping he has more moments this split, and that he's able to like find consistency with his team. I really liked Icy on this team. I think he's evolved as a player. I don't know what, but maybe going to G2, seeing some of his problems, and then came back, talked to Potter. They're maybe like addressing some of those issues, but I do see like way more aggression from Icy's play. And I do think that like Ye is definitely a compliment. Like we saw that they had a lot of chemistry together, and I would like to continue growing that chemistry between those two. But for some reason, maybe it's in my mind, but I feel like it's sort of like detached between what the core of EG was and what like the two new players are
Mm.
on this team. I don't know. Maybe that was the vibe that I got. What about you? Aside from them like
Uh,
being eh.
I just like I'd probably have them around here too because I have them at like the fourth lowest, just because. Well, I think the team has a lot of talent, has a lot of like interesting ideas. I think just the Americas is a pretty hard region to win games in, and we saw that when they lost 0-2, they got swept by both Loud and MIBR. Their only win was against Furia. I do think they'll get a little bit of a boost at the beginning of Split One because the core, the ideas that this team have are always really good. That being said, I just don't think they can really win against any of the teams like 6 and up.
Right.
Like they're just not really there yet. They don't have the full on talent. Like if Ye really becomes Ye, which I don't think Ye is just a player now. I think we all have to just like let him be. He's
True.
just a player, and so we can't view him as a superstar. He'll have flash out moments, which we saw, but that's why like I would probably have him down like at C, like what we have, and maybe even like closer to the bottom of C.
Yeah, I agree, but I want to put like a footnote on this like C placement and just say like I do think that if this team can find like some higher level of chemistry, and even if they just improve a little bit, they are going to be able to upset teams. Like their
Mm-hmm.
biggest thing during kickoff for me was that they weren't able to close out games, and you saw that against MIBR, where they
Mm-hmm.
were up on certain instances. And their first match was I for some reason can't remember. There was a lot of times where EG were up on the map and then they just choked it away. So they need to find a way to close out those maps so at least they can get 1 or 2 maps. But I agree with you. I think the team's not quite as good as some of these other ones in Americas, and I think they deserve top of C.
Yeah.
All right, Andy, we're going to your home turf. We got Cloud9. I need you to open this up because you're the fan.
I'm a fan. That's why they're below EG.
Oh, shoot. That is not what I was expecting.
Yeah, because I just don't really have faith in this team right now. Like, what's interesting about this team? Like, honestly, like,
Not much.
there's a lot to be excited about all the rest of the teams pretty much. We'll talk about Furia in a second, but there's something to be excited about for the rest of these teams. But Cloud9, there's like, you know what you're going to get. You know that they're going to win like random games.
Right.
Like, and they'll look so good. They're a team that, if anyone knows about like basketball, like they're an AAU team. Like,
okay.
like they're have moments where they have a lot of talent, and then there's moments where they all play individually. They're all sloppy, and then they all get mad.
True.
So yeah, I have nothing else.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to disagree with you here. I do think that they're B tier, middle of the pack. I mean, it's like you said. There are times where this team looks good, and there are times when this team looks like a mess. I think it was their second game where, for some reason, like Oxy was getting like 2 or 3 kills per round, and just nobody else was getting kills, and it was incredibly frustrating. But then you have games like the game against NRG, and they're just like frying. So for me, they're like smack dab in the middle of the Americas, and I do think that they look better than EG. I guess I still am biased because I'm not a fan of Cloud9 as an org, but I do have to admit, I do think that they're way better than EG. I have to put them, if we want to keep them in C, that's fine. But I do think that they're over EG.
My only thing is with Cloud9 is that if Xeppaa didn't have a insane game against NRG, they would have lost and been eliminated 0-2 against, and it would have been NRG and G2, but still, like, I just think it would have been it would have been swept in the tournament if it wasn't for Xeppaa having a career game, which I don't think will happen again this year.
Okay. All right.
But
so are we good with this?
Yeah,
Cloud9 top of C? Okay, perfect. All right, moving on. We have, oh my goodness, if it wasn't for 2G, this would be the worst team in VCT Americas. We have Furia.
Yeah. And also Furia is going to have a rough time in their split one. They play like G2 right away, NRG Lev, they Cloud9 MIBR. Yeah, like they're going 0-5.
Yeah, this team, it frustrates me to no end because I want another really good Brazilian team. We'll talk about Loud later. But Furia, they showed promise in the offseason. Then they kind of just tanked out of the tournament in really embarrassing fashion. Like, they didn't even look like they belonged here. It was incredibly embarrassing, especially after I had thrown them a bone in my haters guide. I decided, you know what? I'll hate a lot, but I'll give them a little bit of credit here. And then they just proved to me that they're the exact same team that they were last year. I'm still confused why this roster hasn't exponentially changed. I mean, it's not like there's not people in tier 2. And then it's just baffling to me, like, the amount of, like, nepotism going on this team. Like, MW Zera still here, Khalil's still here. And I'm not saying that they're, like, awful players, but it's just time to move on from these players.
Yeah, especially when you're just not...
Performing.
These are all known commodities now, and you go and you lose 2 games against teams that didn't even end up like going like super, like it was Lev and EG. Like, you can't even, the most you get is 8 rounds on. These are 4 different maps, 4 of your maps. Like, you just couldn't get any like rounds really. Like that's not good. So
yeah.
I just have nothing else to say other than, yeah, D tier.
Yeah, if it wasn't for 2G's atrocious performance, I mean, I would put him below them. All right, moving on to probably the best team in America, because this is not even like a debate. I mean, we got to put G2 at S tier. I mean, they just played incredible, even in Masters Bangkok. I mean, the grand final, one of the best grand finals ever in the history of Valorant.
Mm.
I don't really have too much to say other than I don't think that this team's gonna slow down. There's just no empirical evidence to suggest something like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I just there's nothing else to say. Like anything other than that. Like we've talked about them so many times. Like they're just really good Valorant.
Yep, really good Valorant. All right, moving on, we have KRU. Now, KRU is an interesting predicament because they
I don't.
did place fourth, which means they would technically have qualified if this was Champions. But this isn't Champions, and they missed out on Bangkok. I do think that they have quite a bit of talent. I like Shy, I like Keznit, I like Mazzino. Adverso growing on me, and for some reason I just can't remember the fifth player right now. But I am quite excited about KRU. I think they're going to have a much better season than they did last year. I mean, they performed quite well in the kickoff tournament, even though they didn't qualify. They were going up against some tough teams like MIBR, but the MIBR got really like lucky through the lower run. And I think also it's just an ASPAS led team. That's just like inevitable when it comes to him. Other than that, I think that if they can, they never are the leaders in their meta, which is like what frustrates me the most because they can never seem to get like ahead of other teams. It's like they wait to see what the trends are for other teams to set, and then they kind of follow, but they never are able to like master those trends. They're just kind of like followers. And I feel like that's what maybe the reason why they always fall short of like qualifying for international stages.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like the hardest team for me to kind of gauge because I have them like optimistically at the highest end, like third. But then like the worst, like they could be like seven.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we've seen it like over and over, like how like inconsistent KRU is and throughout the years. And it's not like the core has changed too much either throughout the years.
But like I really like this team though. Like we were talking like this team has so many good pieces. This is I think the best crew has ever been with like the talent that they have. Like Melzer, Mazzino, Keznit, Adverso, like that's a pretty like that's the team that you like. That's a LATAM team,
Right.
and that's why it's like really hard to gauge from them. Like I'd have to see. I think the big test will be can they beat Loud in their opening match. If they can beat Loud, then they're going to be on the high end. If they can't, they're going to be towards like lower B tier. But I don't know what they would. I think they're lower A, higher B, like maybe a little bit above 100 Thieves.
I think I would put them higher B just based off of like their placements. But I also don't want to disrespect KRU either because they did do really good at kickoff.
Yeah.
So actually, yeah, I'll go with low A. That seems like a fair assessment. It just it's just the wild inconsistency from this team is what scares me the most of putting them A tier.
They have 5 shooters though, which
They do. Okay, moving on to my favorite team of VCT Americas, Leviathan. I didn't like their performance at kickoff. I think they just barely skated by against Furia, and then, I mean, they got destroyed by G2.
yeah, I am not impressed with this team really
Not one bit.
whatsoever, especially after dropping a tank and bringing in Rossi. Like I think I just don't think that's like a real big. That's not going to move anything for this team, and I think it's just meant that they had to use this month to kind of feel out the team again rather than like build forward. While the other teams have been building forward with their roster, they kind of had to like figure it out just a tiny bit more. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I have less hope in this team now.
I think this team is a ticking time bomb. I mean, I just don't see how this like team is gonna end up like working out. I mean, you have Kingg, who is a LATAM player, coming in English for a bunch of like NA players, and all these players have like not been part of like one system for a really long time. they looked awful in kickoff. I don't know. To me, like this team is like so weird. It's hard to assess. And not like the crew like inconsistent weird. It just like this team is like, oh, let me get like all my favorite NA players that are in the free agent market and like put them together. Like,
Well, I think
yeah,
it's like Frankenstein's monster of like
yeah.
NA talent that all was like, oh, this is kind of weird. I can't find a place, and then they came here. It's like a 10-year-old's like fantasy Valorant team.
Yeah. That's a good assessment of that. For me,
Yeah.
I will give them some respect. I think they're probably better than EG. But I
I
wouldn't put them over Cloud9.
I was actually kind of thinking that right now Lev is higher than Cloud9. I think they're about the same. I guess Lev has more proven talent. If Demon One can hit his shots and play maybe a little bit more active, I would have him above Cloud9. But I think they're about the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is probably a good spot. I think these probably two are like interchangeable, but I do
Yeah.
I do trust Cloud9 to be a little more consistent, which is why I'm personally going to put them just slightly up ahead Leviathan.
Okay.
All right, talking about a team that came out of nowhere, we're gonna talk about Loud because Loud, I think, performed really, really well throughout kickoff, and I think it's because this is technically a core that people don't realize existed from the old Star Horizons team.
I I think before the season started, I made like the bold prediction that Loud was going to be the best Brazilian team, and I was almost right if it wasn't for ASPAS just like carrying MIBR at the end.
Yeah.
Um, with that being said, I still believe in Loud so heavy, especially with a month of like time to prepare. Because
Yeah.
I like this is gonna sound crazy, but like I would have them as like the second best team.
I am inclined to agree, but
Because
to
this team,
me the biggest thing about this team is their retakes. Their retakes are so sloppy. So sloppy. They can hold sites because DGC is just like an absolute demon on the op. But the problem is that a lot of these like higher level teams have figured out that, oh, DGC's on this site with the op. Let's rotate because his retake with the op is not that good.
but I feel like, man, yeah, I could totally see that happening, and I think that was something that happened in the crew game on, yeah, on Bind,
Mm.
and then and on Haven, and I think that could definitely be the case. I just the amount of like consistent talent on this team was the reason why I was so up on them because Pancada, Cowanzine, Gigizin, Tui's, like there's all four of these players are like could be the best player on their team at some point. Like this is a very talented team, especially now that like Deadlock's going to be put up more. Maybe they can really help on their like retakes. That's what I'm hoping that like maybe this meta is actually going to be more inclined to their own abilities and help them with that retaking.
Um.
Because maybe they
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
shut down sites early and just
Yeah.
like fight it early.
I like what you're saying, and I'm optimistic that that could happen. I will not give him the A tier, unfortunately, because I need to see it happen. I think they had a great kickoff. I think that things are going, better than most people anticipated the season to start. I thought they were going to have a much slower start and that we would see that form during stage one. But I really, really need to see them build from that, and I need to see more consistency. And I do think that this stage one is going to be the perfect place to like show that a lot more and to see if the meta favors them much more.
I'll just tell everyone this is my ride or die this season. I
Really?
predicted them at the beginning. I will continue to predict them, and if they fail me, they fail me.
Okay. All right. So, we'll do top of B. Is that
Yeah, I'm
okay?
fine with
Okay,
that.
okay, okay.
Above 100 Thieves, I'm happy with.
Okay, okay, okay. Cool. Okay. Moving on to the most interesting team for sure. We're gonna talk about MIBR. Go ahead, go ahead. I know you got
You
something
can't
cooking.
say I feel like Loud's above MIBR.
I I
I just
I
don't
think
like
that
this
this team
team.
is like super spotty. I think if
I,
ASPAS is not cooking for them, that it's not that they're not like good. It's just that they're more middle of the pack if ASPAS is not carrying them.
but like, if Loud won the crew game and played MIBR, I feel like they would have beat MIBR. I just think they're a better team.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I think so too. There's a lot of positives about this team. I think Cortesia has been
mhm.
really a big factor for this team. Um, oh, also, like, if you didn't check out our video last week, we talked about Nauser being benched for MIBR, and then someone else is coming in. Nothing has been confirmed. There's a Verno rumor, which I don't think is taking as much precedence as I think most people are thinking of. But yeah, go check out that video. Come after this one. Anywho, MIBR, I really think that Ardzin shifting over to the IGL role really gave him that explosive like potential. I mean, I've never heard of someone IGLing while playing Raze and doing it well. Because last time we saw something like that, I guess it was safe, but before that it was Scream. Um, but but yeah, I like this team. I think that they have a good bit of talent here, and I think depending on who they bring in, also there's a rumor that Saucy might be the new player. If it is Saucy, I think this team is propelled right up to the S tier. But if it's just like some tier 2 talent, I think I would have to agree that they maybe go in the B tier on the same level as Loud.
Yeah, because I would have them like it's kind of hard because these teams up in like the A and B tier, I would have really interchangeable because even like 100 Thieves can have like I would even have them lumped into that or even crew. That being said, I think my thing is I think it worked like well enough in the kickoff, but I think if Safe can't IGL, like Safe isn't the best IGL, but if Safe can't IGL a team of superstars that well as a duelist, I don't think Artisan will be able to do it consistently for the rest of the season.
Mm-hmm.
That's but then again, like I think I think the team's just gonna descend into chaos. That's like my fear. They're like a time bomb to me.
I don't really think so. And the reason I say that is because even if you use the Safe example, like Safe was able to IGL a team of supers into top 4. And the only reason they lost was because they lost to another team of supers.
Yeah, but he couldn't. One of their worst maps, like strategically, was when he was on the duelist,
Okay.
and that was my like because I just think currently in the meta that we're in, I don't think right now duelist you should be having to split your brain like that. Like it can work on maps and work at moments, but I think long term it's
Oh
not the
no.
best idea. But
Spe- Specifically that map that they lost when they were playing Haven with Jet. I mean that was an overcooked composition.
yeah, that is true. That is true. Like it could work. Like I'm not saying that they're not going to win. I just don't have too much faith. And now benching Aspas's friend maybe, but I feel like Aspas would have known ahead of time, so he wouldn't get all mad like he was on the last team, like on Lev.
I don't know. It's a sticky situation for sure as far as that.
Because yeah, I just don't get what's happening.
But
Truthfully,
in my opinion, I think we put him at like high B, just because we need to respect the top
yeah,
3 placement and you know
I agree.
Aspas.
Yeah, that's always the thing. It's like you have to factor him in because he is on the team. Like,
Right. Okay, moving on to the bane of my existence in the last 2 years, NRG. Now, I always hype up this
Yeah,
team for some goddamn reason, and the last ever since VCT started or franchising started, it has not gone well for me. Uh, we kind of basically crashed out. We won one game against 100 Thieves, and that was a really good game and all, but we just crumbled to KRU for some reason. I don't understand. Like, Mada was still really good. Then we had the whole Verno incident where, like, people were, like, finding the clips of him saying he didn't care, and then you have a lot of the podcasts saying like, oh, like the NRG podcasts and people saying, oh, like we're finally trying now. I'm like, yeah, okay, I guess. Like you don't have to, throw shots at Verno without throwing shots, but whatever. We they bring in Brock, Bonker left, Mike's HD comes in. I don't know, it's a mess. Do I expect this team to like be top performers? No, not. I think I've learned my lesson. Not really. Do I think the team has talent? Absolutely. Are they going to win a couple of games? I sure hope so. But I think I'm a little more reserved, a lot more reserved than I've been in the past.
originally, when I wrote my power ranking, I had NRG pretty low. But then I remembered about Brock and how I think Brock was actually the absolute like best pick they could have gotten from NA, because he would fit so much more with this team that like he has more energy, he is communicative, and he's a pretty solid player. Like I think he will definitely struggle, but he's not going to struggle like vibes wise. And I think that's something that this team needed, especially like I think people want to act like CS players are all stoic and everything. No, they're really emotional based. They just act very stone faced. So like I think having someone that's like more like fun, like having Brock instead of Verno is going to be such a different feeling for this team, especially with that month. Like, I have actually more faith now, even with all the chaos.
Yeah, I think that they're going to still be pretty good. Because I think the regular season will benefit them a lot more. They're gonna have a bigger cushion to be able to adjust things. And Mod has been playing really, really well. Based off
Mm-hmm.
his kickoff performance, and he's coming back with Brock, which Brock was his teammate on Shopify, Rebellion or MXS, however you want to say it. Um, so I do think that there's a lot of upside going into this split with NRG. That being said, I still like to think that they're probably like right where I put them.
That's because yeah, it's just that it's the middle part is just so hard. Uh, all these teams are kind of around the same, but yeah, Energy has more uncertainty than any of the other teams above them.
Yeah. Okay, and finally we have Sentinels. Sentinels did not do well at Masters Bangkok, but we also have to remember that Masters Bangkok was the top 8 teams of the entire world. And it's tough competition when you have to go up against, all those teams. Obviously, I don't think they look as bad as like, a Trace or anything like that, and they still are one of the top teams in Americas. Um I have an affinity of putting them pretty much at A tier. I think they're still better than KRU by like a mile. Um and I think that even if they are having, some team issues, I still think that they belong at the top of A. That the talent's still there, the coaching's still there. Um they might not be, the world beaters that, people were thinking that were going to be, but I still think they're one of the best teams in VCT Americas on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I would probably say that I have them at like third on my list. So like yeah, I'd probably have them in A. They were able to push G2 to map 5 in the grand finals. Had some really good plans and ideas, which stumped like G2 and Valen. So, like, you know, they're still trying to figure out the agent pools, still trying to figure out comps. I think that was what kind of slowed them down, like long term. But yeah, they're gonna make the other two internationals. I don't see that not happening. But the question is always like, how far can they do it internationally? So yeah, like I'd have them at second.
Yeah, I think it's important to that when we do ask how far will they go, I think a lot of people do think how far will they go internationally and not regionally, because they are still really a top team.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and that's been our analysis of VCT Americas. Join us tomorrow when we do the VCT EMEA tier list. For Esports Andy, I'm Zeph. We'll see you tomorrow.